Abuja, the city of dreams, where ambition thrives, but so does corruption. Beneath its towering skyscrapers and glamorous façade, secrets fester in the shadows. For Ethan Okafor, the ruthless legal world is his battleground, but it's the woman he loves, Amina, who holds the key to a darker, more dangerous truth. When Ethan takes on a case that could expose a powerful tech mogul, he's thrust into a web of betrayal, corruption, and secrets that threaten everything he's worked for. As his world unravels, Ethan discovers that in Abuja, the price of ambition might just be everything you hold dear. Will he uncover the truth, or will he become a pawn in a game far bigger than he ever imagined? Stay tuned, because in the heart of Abuja, trust is a luxury and betrayal is just the beginning. This gripping tale begins now. Stay with me, you won't want to miss a moment. The heart of Abuja. Abuja had always been a city of paradoxes. Beneath its buzzing streets and soaring skyscrapers lay a world of contradictions, unrelenting ambition entangled with systemic corruption. It was a place where wealth was paraded but came at the expense of moral compromises, where dreams could be built or destroyed with a single decision. For Ethan Okafor, Abuja was not merely a city. It was the stage of his life, the crucible in which his ambition was both forged and tested. He had grown up with little, learning early that the city rewarded only the ruthless and the resilient. And though Ethan had climbed to the heights of the legal world, each step forward was shadowed by the threats lurking in the shadows of Abuja's underbelly. Ethan was a senior associate at Montgomery & Associates, the most prestigious law firm in Abuja, and one of the city's most notorious power players. His clients ranged from politicians to international corporations, and his legal prowess had earned him the trust of some of the most influential people in Abuja. But every victory came at a cost, and the further he climbed, the more precarious the ground beneath him seemed. The city had a way of rewarding you for playing by its rules, but it also had a way of punishing those who broke them. His fiancée, Amina, had been his support through every triumph, but now her once unwavering presence seemed more like an enigma than a comfort. Amina was brilliant, a rising star in the tech world, having founded a successful startup that was reshaping the digital landscape of Abuja. The two had been inseparable for years, their connection a shared vision of success and ambition. But recently, something had shifted. Amina's late nights at the office, her sudden trips abroad, and the vacant spaces in her eyes when they spoke, there were too many things Ethan couldn't ignore. His doubts gnawed at him, but he pushed them away, telling himself it was just the pressures of their high-stakes careers. It wasn't until he received the case that would unravel everything that he realized how little he truly understood about the woman he loved. The case involved OBS, the CEO of Titan Technologies, a man whose name was synonymous with power and corruption in Abuja. Ez was not only one of the wealthiest men in Nigeria, but also one of the most dangerous. Behind his charismatic smile and polished public image lay a man who controlled a vast empire of illegal deals, political favors, and secret accounts that spanned across continents. Titan Technologies, under Ez's rule, had a monopoly on everything from tech innovations to government contracts. But now, it seemed that his empire was under threat. Titan's latest venture, a massive infrastructure project involving the government, was in jeopardy due to a dispute with a smaller startup that accused Ez of stealing their intellectual property. Ethan, ever the professional, was assigned to represent Titan Technologies in the case, unaware of how closely tied his personal life was to the matter. As Ethan dove deeper into the case, he discovered that there was much more at play than a simple intellectual property dispute. There were whispers of money laundering, tax evasion, and bribery, patterns of corruption that spread far beyond Titan's boardrooms and into the highest levels of government. But as he began to uncover the truth, the stakes grew higher. Someone wanted him to drop the case, someone powerful enough to ruin his career and perhaps his life. The first warning came not in the form of threats, but with a chilling message on his encrypted phone. Stay away from this case, or you will lose everything. Ethan's pulse quickened as he stared at the message. It wasn't just a threat. It was a warning, a challenge. The game had begun, and the rules were about to change. But the threats only escalated from there. Anonymous envelopes began to arrive at his office, cryptic notes, photos of Amina with other men, and a series of unsettling messages. One photo, in particular, shook him to his core. It was of Amina at a luxury hotel, standing with Obi Ez, her posture familiar, almost intimate. They weren't just business associates, they were clearly in each other's presence for something much more personal. The message that came with the photo was short but clear. Watch her closely. You're in way deeper than you realize. Ethan's world flipped upside down as he realized that his fiancée, the woman he had planned to marry, had been hiding a secret life, one that seemed entangled with the very man he had been investigating. He couldn't believe it. Amina, the woman he had shared his dreams and ambitions with, was not only having an affair with Ez, but she was also likely involved in the very corruption Ethan had been working to expose. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. His love, his trust in her, had been shattered. But it wasn't just the affair that rattled him, it was the truth behind it. Why had Amina been involved with Ez? Was she just another pawn in his corrupt game, or was she actively helping him pull the strings from the shadows? Ethan's mind raced with questions, each one more painful than the last. When he confronted her that evening, the storm that followed was inevitable. Amina was in the living room, pacing back and forth on a call when he entered. The moment she saw him, her face flushed with panic and she hung up quickly. Ethan didn't need to ask any questions. He had seen the signs, and now the reality was undeniable. He was no longer the man who could ignore the truth. He was a man in the midst of a storm. Amina, Ethan said, his voice hoarse. What's going on? Why have you been lying to me? Amina's eyes darted nervously, her usual confidence completely gone. She sank into a chair, her shoulders heavy with guilt. Ethan, I never wanted you to find out this way, but I've been seeing Obi for months now. I never meant to hurt you, but I was caught up in something bigger. I didn't know how to get out. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he had shared his life with, had betrayed him in ways that were incomprehensible. He staggered back, his head spinning with confusion and rage. Before he could say anything, his phone buzzed again. The message from Frank Montgomery, the senior partner at the firm, was clear. Drop the case. This is bigger than you think. Leave Ez alone. Or else. Ethan's mind reeled. Frank's warning wasn't just a casual suggestion, it was a direct command, a demand to step away from a case that had now become far too dangerous. But Ethan couldn't walk away, not when he was this close to uncovering the truth, not when he knew how deeply entrenched Amina was in the world of corruption. Just then, the doorbell rang. Ethan froze. He wasn't expecting anyone, and the timing couldn't have been worse. When he opened the door, he found himself face to face with a man in a dark suit, his face obscured by shadows. I'm here to help you, Mr. Okafor, the man said cryptically. But you have to listen to me carefully. The deeper you go into this case, the more you put everything at risk, not just your career, but your life. If you want to survive, you need to make some hard choices. The man handed Ethan an envelope and left without another word. Inside, Ethan found a single piece of paper with a name written on it, Kenny Ibe. Underneath in bold letters, the man who knows everything. Who was Kenny Ibe? And what role did he play in all of this? Ethan didn't know if he could trust the stranger who had just appeared on his doorstep. But one thing was certain, he was in far too deep to turn back now. As the night wore on, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that everything in his life was spiraling out of control. His fiancée had betrayed him, his career was hanging by a thread, and now there were mysterious figures lurking in the shadows, warning him about forces he couldn't even begin to comprehend. Abuja was no longer just a city. It was a dangerous, complex web of power, lies, and betrayal, and Ethan was caught in its center, struggling to untangle the truth. The next day, as he walked into the office of Montgomery and Associates, he was greeted by a tense silence. The firm's power players, The senior partners were all gathered in a room, waiting for him. He could feel their eyes on him, scrutinizing his every move. It was clear that Frank's message wasn't just a warning. It was the beginning of something much darker. "You've been warned, Ethan," Frank said, his voice cold. "This case is too big. You're not the only one who's been investigating OBS. There are bigger players involved now, and they're not going to stop until you're out of the picture. You need to drop this case before it destroys you." But Ethan wasn't ready to back down. Not yet. As he looked around the room, he saw the faces of his colleagues, each one a potential ally or enemy. In Abuja, trust was a rare commodity, and Ethan had no idea who he could rely on anymore. The only thing he knew for sure was that he couldn't give up, not when the stakes were so high. He had to keep moving forward, but at what cost? Abuja, the city of dreams, was fast becoming a nightmare for Ethan Okafor. Days had passed since he discovered Amina's betrayal and received the threatening message from Frank Montgomery. But the gravity of the situation only seemed to deepen. Ethan hadn't slept much. Every shadow seemed to hold a new threat, and every phone call brought fresh dread. He knew he was being watched. There was no escaping it now. Determined to unravel the truth, Ethan confronted Amina one last time. They sat in the dimly lit living room of their apartment, the silence between them suffocating. Amina's tear-streaked face mirrored her guilt, but Ethan's steely gaze revealed no trace of forgiveness. "Why him, Amina?" Ethan's voice was low, but the pain in it was unmistakable. She hesitated, wringing her hands. "It started as business," she murmured. "I needed his investment for my company, and I didn't know how to say no when things got personal." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Personal? Do you even realize what you've done? Do you know the kind of man he is?" "I didn't know everything at first," she admitted. "But Ethan, Obi isn't just powerful, he's dangerous. He owns people. Politicians, the police, even your firm." That revelation hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. "What are you saying?" Amina's voice trembled. "I overheard a conversation between Obi and Frank Montgomery weeks ago. Frank is on his payroll. Your firm isn't representing Obi's enemies, you're covering his tracks. Ethan, the case you're working on, it's a trap. They want you silenced." The weight of Amina's words sent Ethan spiraling. Every case he'd worked on for Montgomery and Associates suddenly seemed tainted. But he couldn't trust Amina, not after everything. He needed someone else, someone outside the web of lies. Ethan reached out to his childhood friend, Samuel Sam Adewale. Sam had grown up in the rougher parts of Abuja and had turned his knack for survival into a career as an investigative journalist. If anyone could help him piece this puzzle together, it was Sam. They met in a dimly lit bar in GRA period. Sam's tall, lanky frame was hunched over a laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. When Ethan sat down, Sam glanced up, his sharp eyes scanning his friend's face. "You look like hell," Sam said, closing his laptop. "I feel worse," Ethan replied, sliding the envelope with the photograph across the table. "I need your help." Sam studied the photo and the accompanying note carefully. "This is serious. Ez isn't just another corrupt businessman, he's untouchable. If you're going after him, you're playing with fire." "I don't have a choice," Ethan said. "He's destroyed everything, my career, my relationship. I can't let him get away with it." Sam leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "All right, but if we're doing this, we do it my way. No half measures. And you need to understand, once we start digging, there's no turning back." Sam's first lead came quickly. Through his network of informants, he discovered that one of OBE's shell companies, Nova Trade Ventures, was linked to illegal arms smuggling. If they could find proof, it would be a significant step toward exposing Obi's empire. But tracking Nova Trade Ventures wasn't easy. Their investigation took them to the docks at Apapa, where the company allegedly received shipments. Sam had arranged for them to meet a dock worker willing to talk. But when they arrived, the man was nowhere to be found. As they waited near a stack of shipping containers, Ethan felt a sudden unease. The air seemed too still, and the usual hum of activity at the docks was eerily quiet. "Sam," Ethan whispered, "something's wrong." Before Sam could respond, a group of men emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by hoods. They carried weapons, machetes, iron rods, and a handgun gleaming in the dim light. "You've been asking too many questions," one of them growled. Ethan's heart pounded as he and Sam backed away slowly. "We're just here to talk," Sam said, raising his hands. The man with the gun laughed. "Talking won't save you now." What happened next was chaos. Sam grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him behind a stack of containers as the men lunged. Ethan scrambled for cover, his breath ragged as he heard the clatter of metal on concrete. Sam grabbed a rusted pipe lying nearby, using it to fend off one of the attackers. Ethan's mind raced. He spotted a loose wooden plank and used it to strike another assailant. The fight was desperate and messy, but they managed to escape, slipping into the maze of containers and losing their pursuers. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, Sam's lip was bleeding and Ethan's hands were trembling. "This is bigger than we thought," Sam said, his voice grim. "If they're willing to kill to protect their secrets, we're onto something." The near-death experience only strengthened their resolve. Ethan knew they needed to dig deeper, but they also needed allies. Sam suggested they meet with Funmi Igbenedian, a former whistleblower who had once exposed a major corruption scandal in Abuja. Funmi was cautious at first, but after hearing their story, she agreed to help. She provided them with access to financial records linking Nova Trade Ventures to several offshore accounts tied to OBS. But their progress came at a cost. Ethan returned home one evening to find his apartment ransacked. Papers were strewn everywhere and his laptop was gone. A message scrawled on the wall in red paint read, "Stop now, or you'll regret it." Ethan knew he couldn't stay there any longer. He moved into a safe house Sam had arranged, a dingy one-room flat in the outskirts of Abuja. Meanwhile, Amina was facing her own battles. Obi had grown increasingly controlling, and she realized too late that she had been nothing more than a pawn in his game. She tried to contact Ethan, but he refused to answer her calls. Desperate, she sent him a message. "I know you hate me, but I have information that can help you. Meet me at the old railway station at midnight." Ethan was torn. He didn't trust Amina, but he couldn't ignore the possibility that she might have valuable information. With Sam by his side, he went to the meeting. Amina was there, looking more fragile than he'd ever seen her. "Obi is planning something big," she said, her voice trembling. "There's a shipment coming in tomorrow, something illegal. If you can intercept it, you'll have enough evidence to bring him down." Ethan hesitated, studying her face for any sign of deceit. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. She looked away, tears glistening in her eyes. "Because I owe you that much, and because I want to make things right." The tension was palpable as they left the station, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The web of shadows had tightened around him, and the next move could cost him everything. Abuja was alive, throbbing with its usual cacophony of voices, honking horns, and the unrelenting grind of survival. But for Ethan, the city now felt like a predator circling its prey, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The evidence he and Sam had uncovered from the Apapa warehouse was damning. It not only implicated OBS in arms trafficking and fraud, but exposed a sprawling network of corruption that reached into the highest echelons of power. It was bigger than anything Ethan had ever imagined. But with every new discovery, the danger only intensified. Ethan sat in the shadows of his apartment, the curtains drawn tight and the room lit dimly by the glow of his laptop screen. Stacks of documents, encrypted drives, and photographs lay strewn across the desk. The air felt heavy, the kind of silence that carried the weight of impending danger. He couldn't stop replaying the events of the past few weeks in his mind, Amina's betrayal, the threats from his boss, the chilling reality of the network they were up against. Sam, ever the cautious one, had gone to meet an international journalist to smuggle out some of the evidence. But Ethan's instincts told him they were running out of time. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was an unknown number, but he had learned not to ignore calls. "Hello?" he answered, his voice tense. A distorted voice came through, cold and mechanical. "Ethan Okafor, you've stepped too far. This is your final warning. Drop everything or you'll lose more than just your career." The line went dead before Ethan could respond. His hands tightened around the phone, the threat igniting a fire in his chest. Moments later, a knock on the door shattered the quiet. Ethan froze, every muscle in his body tensing. Grabbing a knife from the kitchen counter, he approached cautiously. "Who is it?" he called out, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "It's me, Amina," came the reply period. Ethan hesitated, the knife trembling slightly in his grip. He opened the door to find Amina standing there, her face pale and her eyes darting nervously. "I had no one else to turn to," she whispered, stepping inside before he could protest. "They're after me, Ethan. Obi's men. They think I betrayed them." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, Ethan saw the vulnerability in her that he had once fallen in love with. But his heart was a battlefield now, torn between anger and a lingering sense of duty. "Why should I believe you?" he asked, his tone cold. Amina looked at him, her eyes welling with tears. "Because if you don't, we're both dead." She explained everything in a rush. Obi had grown suspicious of her ever since Ethan started digging deeper into the case. Amina had tried to distance herself from him, but Obi had his claws too deep. When she learned about the warehouse, she realized the extent of his operations and began secretly gathering information, hoping to escape his grip. But she underestimated Obi's reach. Now she was on the run, with no allies left. Ethan wanted to scream, to demand answers about her betrayal, but there was no time. His phone buzzed again. It was Sam. "Ethan, they know about the journalist. We're compromised. Get out of there now." The line went dead, and Ethan felt the weight of the world crashing down on him. As if on cue, the faint sound of tires screeching to a halt outside the building sent a chill down his spine. He peered through the curtains and saw two black SUVs pulling up. Men in suits, armed and purposeful, spilled out and headed for the entrance. "We need to move," Ethan said, grabbing a backpack filled with the evidence. Amina nodded, her fear palpable. They slipped out through the back stairwell, the sound of heavy boots echoing in the distance. The streets of Abuja became their maze, the neon lights and bustling crowds offering both cover and danger. Ethan led them to a safe house Sam had arranged, a rundown apartment in a less conspicuous part of town. Inside, Sam was already waiting, his face a mix of relief and frustration. "What is she doing here?" he snapped, glaring at Amina. "She's part of the reason we're in this mess." Ethan raised a hand to silence him. "We don't have time for this. They're onto us, and we need to act now." The three of them pored over the evidence, formulating a plan. They needed to expose Obi and his network, but doing so from Abuja was impossible. Sam suggested leaking the evidence to an international news outlet with the reach and influence to protect them. It was risky, but it was their only option. As they worked, the tension between Ethan and Amina simmered beneath the surface. She tried to explain her actions, to justify her choices, but Ethan remained distant. He couldn't reconcile the woman he loved with the person who had betrayed him. Yet, in her eyes, he saw regret, a genuine desire to make things right. The final showdown came the next night. They had arranged a meeting with a foreign journalist at a discreet location. But as they approached the site, something felt off. The street was too quiet, the air too still. Ethan's instinct screamed danger, and he was proven right when the first shot rang out. Chaos erupted as Obi's men ambushed them. Ethan and Sam ducked behind cover, returning fire with weapons they had acquired through Sam's contacts. Amina stayed low, clutching the backpack of evidence. The firefight was intense, the sound of gunfire echoing through the deserted street. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to think of a way out. Just when it seemed they were cornered, a group of armed men arrived, private security hired by the journalist. The tables turned and Obi's men were forced to retreat. But the victory was bittersweet. Sam had been hit, the wound serious but not fatal. With the evidence secured, the journalist promised to release it to the world, exposing Obi and his network. Ethan felt a sense of relief, but it was overshadowed by the cost. Amina stood beside him, her face a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "I'm sorry for everything, Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant to hurt you." Ethan looked at her, the weight of everything they had been through hanging between them. "I loved you, Amina. But love without trust is nothing." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, understanding that some wounds couldn't be healed. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was immense. Obi was arrested, his empire dismantled. The corruption within Abuja's elite was laid bare, leading to reforms that would change the city forever. Ethan became a symbol of justice, though the scars of the battle lingered. As he walked through the streets of Abuja, now quieter and more hopeful, he felt a sense of purpose. The city had taken so much from him, but it had also given him a chance to fight for something greater. And though his heart was still healing, he knew he had done the right thing. The web of shadows had been unraveled, and in its place, a new light began to shine.